This week's first game of the week is Mother 1. Mother 1 is, or I guess technically called officially now, Earthbound Beginnings. I'm really not used to that. That is the one name you'll never hear me say is Earthbound Beginnings.
I-
Um,
I'll probably stray from calling it that too, but yeah, that's the Western name. Before that, the fan version was Earthbound Zero, wasn't it called?
Yep, you are correct. Mother 1 is I just call it Mother 1. I call Mother 1 and Mother 3 what they are, and I say Earthbound as Earthbound. Does that make sense? That makes sense to me.
I think it's gonna be pretty easy to grasp for anyone listening.
Okay, cool. Earthbound is Mother 2 in case you need me to spoon feed you, dear listener. All right. Mother 1 is a 1989 RPG developed by Ape and Pax Softnica for the Famicom. It is set in the 1980s, roughly in the United States. I think it may canonically say United States for this one. And stars Ninten, a boy with psychic powers about to go on a journey against the alien invader Geeg. Shigesato Itoi, the main developer and writer of the game, was a famous copywriter and, like, I would say Renaissance artist in Japan. He did a lot of separate work in different fields, mainly known as a copywriter for commercials in a sort of artistic way. And he also, the other big trivia people cite is he was the voice of the dad in the Japanese version of My Neighbor Totoro. That is the common trivia. Also found out in editing via Aiden Mower's Fight Magic Items RPG book, I would highly recommend that Itoi also collaborated with novelist Haruki Murakami, a famous novelist, for a short story collection. So he's a big writer too, just period. So we can familiarize ourselves. But anyways, he approached Nintendo with an idea for an RPG after many days of playing Dragon Quest. Initially, Nintendo and Shigeru Miyamoto were hesitant on the idea, but they eventually warmed up. Mother 1 is mostly a Dragon Quest clone in terms of the actual combat system and point of view of the combat and traversal and the story structure, etc., but in a modern setting for the time, I guess. The ad campaign, ironically not done by Itoi, famously prided the emotional value of the story and said, "No crying until the ending." David, what did you think of this game?
Lots of things. I thought lots of things. That's the interesting bit. But ultimately, the conclusion I had when I walked out, I was like, particularly considering what games were at this time, this is pretty great. But
I agree.
But you know, in the context of everything and playing it today, it is
Yeah.
it is a good game that takes a lot of fortitude to get through.
I think this is one of those scenarios where I think you and I have talked about this a lot now, is there are games that it's an age thing where it's like for its time it works, and then as it gets on, there's a lot to like about Mother 1. There's a lot I like about Mother 1 that the other two games do have, but to lesser extents. Does that make sense?
Yeah. There are some, despite how many similar things there are, particularly with Earthbound to Mother 1, there are some unique and distinguishing qualities and aspects that make Mother 1 still its own and interesting and worth engaging with and playing. It's not just, as many people, might have considered it, a rough draft for Earthbound. It is its own game.
Yeah, when you came to us, or came to me originally, you're like, all right, so if we do a Mother game, which one should we do? I was like, we should do Mother 1. In my head, number one, I always like number ones because you can see the start of a franchise and see how it evolves. But then the other aspect is like people overlook it so much just because they don't necessarily want to engage with it. Sometimes I don't blame them.
Yeah.
But like it is its own identity, and I think it is essential to playing the trilogy. You know what I mean? I think you are missing out if you skipped it.
Yeah, especially when it comes to 3, which we'll get to another day. We're going to, for sure.
Yeah.
Don't worry, it's coming soon. There's definitely some emotional beats or moments that if you didn't play Mother 1, you might miss. Not as much as Earthbound kind of ties in, but there is elements of Mother 1, and also just throughout the series, also in Earthbound, there are echoes there that have further impact if you've played the first one. But
Exactly. There's like repeating areas and repeating NPCs that repeat in all three games, and without the context of Mother One, maybe a lot of people just replace it in their head with Earthbound, which is, I guess, fair. But like, yeah, it just brings a lot of context to everything.
I will say though, if you're like someone who's listening to this and wanting to get in for the first time, maybe don't start with Mother One, depending on how much endurance for bullshit you have. Maybe start with Earthbound, like everyone in America did.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about multiple things. First of all, this game was a huge hit in Japan and then did not come out in America. It was just too late in the NES lifespan for it. They did add a run button to the American port of the game, which I feel is essential to the game.
Yep. That is one big advantage it has over Earthbound for sure. You can run. That's
oh my
that
God.
is vital. That is vital. I have that in my notes here. Run button is game changing.
Yeah, it's a big one. Oh yeah. The real problem with the game is the random battles.
Yeah. Do we just want to get into that right off the bat? Yeah. I mean, it's a problem from the start. That's the big thing. Like the beginning of the game is especially bad with just how
I think the game gets way better as it goes on.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, once you're able to. All three games have this kind of difficulty in the beginning, I would say, whereas like as a lone party member, you have far less assets to deal with issues. And
Mother 3 does that multiple times too.
Yeah. It's infamously known in Earthbound that like the beginning section is probably the biggest hurdle to overcome. But it's also the case, I would say, in Mother 1 here, where literally just in the very beginning of the game, I just had to keep throwing myself at enemies until like heading to the graveyard. I just had to keep throwing myself and dying until I was able to get enough experience to not instantly die to random zombies. Like you just get one slightly different iteration of a zombie that's powerful and you're fucked for a bit.
The graveyard and the zoo fucked me so bad. Oh my God. It's so. And I also, spoiler alert, I played an easy baby version. I played the Mother 1+2. I played this game before, but I played the Mother 1+2 GBA port. And the guy who made the Mother 3 translation made a Mother 1 translation for here that sort of maintains a lot of the localization differences, such as town names or censorship issues. Like zombies have blood in that version and all that. So, you know, or the crow smoking. It's just little things, right?
Is that a Dumbo reference?
But the what?
I wonder, is the crow thing a Dumbo reference? That's what I think of anyway.
It's possible. It's totally possible. It's a Dumbo reference.
There's a lot of references.
I didn't think about that, but with the cigarette, I guess it makes sense. Yeah. What was I gonna say? But the big thing is it has a double XP, double money. So when Nintendo wears a ring, it takes up a ring slot. So it's not like I fucking. But you know, double XP, double money helps me a lot from grinding. Anyways, even then, it's still fucking hard, and because it's because at the end of the zoo, there's a Starman Junior, and I didn't have the Franklin badge at that time, and devastating. I'm so devastated.
I
think Mother 1 doesn't communicate things very well.
No, it doesn't, and that's I think one of the real incredible strengths of Earthbound when we get to it is that how well it integrates, you know, tutorializing and communication about everything essentially. But Mother 1 is not quite there. It's got a little bit. I still enjoy it more. Again, kind of going back to a comparison point with other games from this era, from this system. It really was kind of like revelatory for me seeing, you know, with less experience in NES titles, how well written and kind of like immersive and less kind of like I don't know, alien feeling the writing in a game like this can feel. Just thinking back to something like Castlevania 2 or Zelda 2, where the writings in those games, the translations are just like infamously awful and turgid.
The localizations is actively bad, whereas here I think Nintendo goes for a big approach where they prioritize design over expression, but because Itoy was a auteur and an artist, he had his fingerprints all over it, so expression is so essential to what the game is.
And I still got it. I played the original translation, the official one that you can play on NSO. And
it's still funny and still good.
Oh yeah, again, it's very humorous and endearing in a lot of the places, and again, informative in a lot of areas. There was I definitely still got lost, and I still had to look up a number of things. I only
worst.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I was gonna say the worst part isn't actually what to do; it's the maps.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, and it goes back to the enemy encounter thing. The maps would not be an issue if the encounter design, the random encounters, was not actively de-incentivizing you from exploring. That's the big issue, is that the two systems are incongruent. They don't work together. The fact that you have to look around places and find things, find certain objects to interact with or places to go to, is actively discouraged, because just walking is a risk of having to stop and interact with these battles every time. And the encounter rate is just really funky. There's literally 2 steps sometimes will just start you into another battle immediately. That's all it takes.
I will say what's interesting, what is really nice, and I wrote this down, I took this note, and I'm about to defend a lot of this game, even though I don't think it is an excuse for how the random encounters are built. Obviously, it was a thing of its time. I think when I consulted Brendan about this, and his answer was, it seems as if it is actually pretty tame for the era it's in. I remember when I played Phantasy Star 1 for this podcast, that encounter rate was wild. I was like, oh my god, it's stopping every time. The issue here in Mother 1 is it's punishing. Even when you're over leveled, the enemies can hit hard if you don't put them down as fast as possible. I think that is an example throughout the series. And typically your main character, Ninten, Ness, and Lucas, are tanks.
Yep.
So they'll be okay. But even then, you can get in positions where you're not comfortable because you spent 1 or 2 turns doing the wrong thing. And then you get punished even though you could probably take these guys normally. You know what I mean? And then the other thing I would say is Ninten can 4th dimensional slip, which means he can disengage from any minor fight. So any random battle he can get out of. And he can also Onyx Hook once you go to Magicant the first time, which means you can teleport to Magicant anywhere pretty much. The issue is that still adds so much time to your fucking game.
Mm-hmm. And there's even encounters in Magicant, so it's not like that's a safe place in and of itself. But yeah,
no.
So there are tools to get around encounter stuff. And there's also there's repel rings, which were an item that I did not use as much as I probably could have to help things. I didn't notice they decrease the encounter rate as much as I thought something like that should.
Yeah, they do it a lot.
Yeah, when I tried them like the 1 or 2 times, I feel like there was definitely some things that I missed which could have made the playthrough easier, but there's also a degree of lacking communicating that to the player that I feel like was inherent to the game that made that kind of suck. But still, I was devoted enough to just kind of grind through and do all the fights. There was only a couple times where I had to dedicate to grinding, I felt like, because otherwise there's just enough encounters that I'm basically grinding my whole way through the game. But yeah. Because of how the random encounters are just established, which is, again, kind of just inherent to the time. I don't know if there's a better way of doing it. I don't know if there's a contemporary. The best thing I could think of is it's a little later, so I don't know if it necessarily applies, but Pokemon has a system, even in its first games, where there are random encounter spots, clearly delineated areas you can walk into, and you're I know I will get a random encounter in this spot if I go through here. And
Yeah.
in Mother 1, it's just not clear. There's even a few towns which up until then have been safe spots, allegedly, where you can get into encounters in certain areas, and you're like, oh, now this place isn't even safe. I don't know. There's no clear indication of where you're not going to get encounters and where you are. And so again, there's just almost no reason to explore other than you're going to have to find some stuff to progress. But that did cause me to miss certain things, like the cactus melody I did not find. I had to go back. And it's funny because I had literally already gone through the desert and like made my way to what I thought was the end and died at like an optional boss fight there. And I was like, okay, well, there's no reason to do this then, so I'm going to move on. But then I had to circle back.
You know what's a really good example of how Mother 1 approaches conveyance? In the spooky town, it's Halloween.
That's a much better name. It's called Spookane in the American translation. Which is
Spookane. In Spookane, right before the mansion, there is a house.
Yeah, yes.
And that person is basically a hint teller. That's like the only hint teller of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And if you say, no, I don't want a hint because you don't have the money or something, she goes away forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a really good example of like, there are hints in the game. And if you talk to every NPC, you will learn a lot. And admittedly, like Shigesato Itoi said, like, Mother 1 should not be a game you rush through. It should be a game you take your time with. But even then, it just ultimately says, like, you're meant to wander around until you find the answer. That is ultimately what's going on.
Yeah.
You know?
And the thing is that I don't have a problem with games like that, which kind of force you to figure things out on your own. But when there's elements that discourage you or punish you for doing that, that's where it becomes a conflict of interest.
Yeah, and I will say when we get to it, Earthbound goes through great lengths. I think it's a tech issue ultimately for random battles.
Yeah, again, it's just probably inherent to what you can do. You definitely couldn't do what Earthbound did to circumvent that issue on the on the Famicom. Like I said, the Pokemon fix was the only one I could think of, but I don't know that there's any of its contemporaries that do something similar to that. It was that was just how games were at this time. If you're going to have this kind of RPG combat system, so it's really just like it feels when you're playing like the encounter rate is just overtuned and ridiculous. But as you said, there's evidence that it's kind of maybe on the lesser side even for the time. I don't know, but that doesn't necessarily make it better play. Yeah, it's still not great to go through. It's definitely the biggest hurdle aside from some other spikes. There's definitely the infamous of Mount Itoi, and there just being some ridiculous enemy encounters that are literally worse than the final boss of the game.
Okay, I'm gonna defend Mount Itoi later. We should go through the rest of the game first. Tell me what you think about the party members of Mother 1.
Let's see. Anna was, or I guess I should start. Pippi was nothing because you just escort her back to her house. Yep. That's like a nothing. Anna was mostly useless to me.
Really?
Yeah. She just died.
She's got Psy.
I know.
She's got offensive Psy.
I know, but she just died.
What did you do?
What do you mean I just do? I just tried to go through the game, and if she gets hit, she dies.
Did you just like mash attack?
No. I mean, obviously I used Psy when I needed, but it never seemed to do as much as I needed it to for a certain area. She wasn't the most useless. Like obviously, Lloyd became way more useless, but you know. I also did just
Lloyd is like crazy useless to me. There's time. Okay, so I will go ahead and describe things real quick. Lloyd uses bombs. You buy bombs or you otherwise get weapons from other things. Like Teddy's gang drops flamethrowers that he can use and stuff. But largely speaking, he uses equipment. And Anna uses offensive Psy and has a little bit more Psy options that are generally different than Ninten's. And then Teddy is like just a fucking
Teddy's fucking MVP, a motherfucker and a half. You know, he was carrying me through Itoi, and then until obviously he gets jetted out. But yeah, the funny thing with Lloyd I found was that because him and Anna obviously seem to have very obvious counterparts in Earthbound with Paula and Jeff. And Jeff obviously is a great party member if you equip him right with bottle rockets and such.
Yes.
And there are bottle rockets in this game too. You get them at the factory where you kind of recruit where you recruit Lloyd initially. But there was one spot where you could like keep getting bottle rockets from.
It's the trash can where you originally get the bottle rocket. It has infinite bottle rockets.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I went back there and I was just like, oh yeah, I'll just load them up on bottle rockets. That seems like it's going to be useful. Just use those against any big boss encounters and everything. They do not work the same, and they are pitiful weapons. And so I found that out much too late, and I was like, oh, now I have just a bunch of useless ass items here. Okay, that sucks.
Yeah, and I think inventory management is also so much more difficult here because you basically have like 8 spots per character, and you can only have 3 party members. Teddy, when you get Teddy, replaces Lloyd.
Yep.
So
Teddy just had all the bottle rockets then.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you have again like the same amount of like key items you got to carry. You still got to carry like your ATM card. You still got to carry the Onyx hook. You got to carry at least you don't have to carry equipment. Like, that just disappears onto your person. Again, kind of like an odd change that Earthbound undid that makes it less in that regard.
Well, I mean, I also think that they took more care into facilitating item changes. We can talk about when we get to Earthbound. But Earthbound, like, thinks about inventory more. My issue is Teddy's not in the game long enough.
No, he's the best party member far and away, and then you lose him. And
you lose them fast too. It's like you've got one town, and then you go into Mount Etoy. Pretty much.
Yep. Unless you get lost figuring out what to do on Mount Etoy, and then you have to spend hours wandering around the place like I did, then you can hang on to him for a while.
No, I mean, true that. I will say, like, I guess that's one of the defenses for Mount Etoy.
Teddy, I think we were talking about Teddy last, how we lose him. I said I got lost on Etoy, on Mount Etoy.
Oh, I was gonna. Yeah, I mean, no, that's how you lose him. Is you go up to the house and then you get ransacked by the giant robot.
Here's the thing.
The thing I was gonna.
No. I need to comment on you. Here's the thing. I literally made it up to the top of the mountain first and got the melody from the grave site there before.
Oh, that's so crazy.
Yeah, because the trigger for getting the melody from and getting Teddy kicked out of the party with the robot encounter is going into the back room of the random hotel that's like halfway up the mountain. And I didn't bother going in the back room because every hotel up until now had a pointless back room. Like
well, they're like, oh, by the way, you two should have a moment to yourselves.
Yeah, it was like, so there's like a tiny indication in the text there, but like not totally clear that I'm like supposed to go in the back room to do that. I don't know. I just kept going forward and I didn't know what to do afterwards. So that was one of the times I had to look up a guide, and I just felt so dumb. And then it kind of undercut like all of the emotional track that, like, because it's a whole dynamic thing there with the robot who ambushes you that you then have to go back and defeat with your own robot that you get.
Yeah, I mean, that also has a moment you can undercut as well.
Yeah.
The thing I was going to defend here, though, is because you have Teddy and because you have the robot's name is Eve, right?
Eve is the one that you get. The other one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So you have Teddy for a portion of the mountain, and you have Eve for a portion of the mountain. And Teddy is just pretty solid. You can handle what's given. And then Eve literally one hits anything she touches.
Literally.
So grinding isn't impossible by that point. You can grind pretty solidly, especially with Teddy, if you take your time with it. It just goes back into that thing where even when you're properly leveled, the enemies hit hard. They just do. Like, they'll fuck you up.
Mount Etoy in particular, there's a huge difference. Like, from one area you're going through, you're doing fine, and then you just go through like a small cave system, and then the next area on the mountain, you're literally getting one shot by like these grizzly bears and stuff. Like, the whole team is, or these gargoyles are just fucking you up with PK fire and just Omega. And, like,
I'm not gonna lie. I by that point in the game, because I knew what I had to do, I 4D slipped most of the time. Mm-hmm. That is mostly what I did. Especially at the very end when you get Eve. You if you go south, you're fucked because the robot gets blown up like immediately. But if you go up north and try to climb Mount Etoy, Eve gets pretty far. You can get pretty far until she encounters her big robot, and then there's like a big robot battle, and then she dies. And then at that point, I just 4D slipped until I got to Geek.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is that you've got to. Well, fortunately, the game puts you right back towards right where you need to fight Geek after you go back to Magicant. So that's nice, at least not too much going there. But yeah, I climbed all the way up the mountain without Eve first, which was a pain. And then I got there and didn't know what to do. And so I had to go and do it a second time with Eve then. So that was, again, it was kind of like a frustrating backtracking element.
Wait, do the rocks not blow up because you don't have Eve? Like if you got the last melody, did you go to Magicant?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out the order of events here. So you went to Magicant before you lost Teddy.
I mean, you go there a number of times.
No, you know what I'm saying.
Oh,
though,
no, I had to lose Teddy. So it should be said that...
Sorry.
Yeah, so the main objective in the game, obviously, is to get all 8 melodies. There's these melodies spread across these multiple places, and you can go to them in a number of different orders. There's a little bit of non-linear progression that you can make here. I also missed the second melody playing through the first time, but I was able to... That one's, I think, the...
Not the zoo one?
No, it's between the zoo and the one. I think it's like a... Is that the piano? No, it's a different one. I don't remember. I went back for it, though, and I got it. I got it fairly early on, because I noticed I was missing it. And so I was able to go back and find it. But I missed the cactus, like I said, in the desert. That was the last one I got, because I just didn't know where the heck it was supposed to go. I had to look that one up. And yeah, I got the very last one before I got the penultimate one, which is the one you get from the robot crashing in.
Yeah.
Well, you get the melody from... Eve.
Oh, that's right. You get the melody from Eve.
Duh. Yeah. So
you couldn't do it.
I got it from the grave site. Then I got it from Eve. Eve was the second to last one I got, but not.
Okay, this makes sense.
So yeah,
all right, this all makes sense.
So when Magicant is destroyed, when you go back and you present the songs to Marie, it spits you out fairly close to Geek. So it's not that much of a trek from what I remember to get back to.
It wasn't that bad for me. It popped me right at the rock. But the thing is I also had teleport. Apparently you didn't have teleport?
I did, but I would not have known to get it if I did. Again, I had to reference a guide for several things.
You had to go to the guide.
Literally, the first stopping point is because of this same thing. I would not have gotten even past the first time you go to Magicant if I didn't have a guide. Because one of the things you have to do is you have to use Ninten's telekinesis powers. It's his telepathy powers to read the minds of the guards in front of the Magicant castle to know the password to get in. And I just did not understand. I did not get that from what they were saying there. And that's also how you learn teleportation, is that you use telepathy on the baby that can teach it to you. But again, that was a case where I felt the game did not reinforce how to use this mechanic enough.
It didn't, though. I will say it is the first psi skill. Ness has that psi skill from the start of the game, and I learned it. You learn it with the dog at the start, because you can use that to talk to him. And you can also talk to other animals or other things with it.
But that's also just instinctual. Like, you don't have to go through a separate command to talk to animals in Earthbound.
Yes. Yeah, no, you're right. It's just, I don't know, man. Telepathy worked. But then it's like, trying to talk to a baby. Oh, I don't know, man. It just made sense. It has, the thing is I think both this and Earthbound have an adventure game logic to it of, what is the answer to this problem? Oh, it's this stupid thing,
Yeah, I guess it's one of those things where there's other cases in Earthbound and even in Mother 1 where like the text would usually kind of guide you in that direction a little bit more. There's just a few places in Mother 1 where I felt like it didn't do it enough, so I literally just did not know what to do. Like I said, with the situation where you're like, you should go spend time alone together. Like I just didn't get that from that text. And there's not a similar text in there to indicate when you should use telepathy, and it's really those only those two instances that you really need it. I think I can't think of another instance where it's really necessary to progress anything. You don't need teleport to finish the game, but you do need to use telepathy to get to that part of Magic Hand, and that is like a hard stop point. I think a hard wall for a number of people if they just don't know to do that.
What else do you want to talk about with this?
Let's see. You mentioned Spokane earlier. There's a couple of moments, I guess, that'll stand out to me in the game. And ultimately, that's one of the reasons why I'm favorable to it. Is that there's moments, scenes, scenarios that kind of stand out and have this impression on you, and I think that really show a uniqueness in a game like Mother One. The one that really kind of caught me the first time going through is that when you're going through Spokane, it's this ghost town in a literal sense. There's like, it's a whole, town, but there's nobody in it. There's one building where someone's there. It's a hotel, and you stay at the hotel, and you heal. And you're going to have to, because there's a lot of combat in the town. That's one of those towns where you can just run into enemies everywhere. So you heal up, and then as soon as you wake up, like you usually do to heal in there, you get... It's a star, man. You get engaged in a fight. You get trapped, and that got me. It spooked me. I was not expecting it. And I was caught off guard, but it was memorable, and it was a fun scenario to have there.
And that is a perfect example, because there's an echo in Earthbound with Threed.
Yep.
It's just done completely differently.
Yeah.
But it's still fundamentally like, oh, there's a it's a haunted town, and here's the bait. You think everything's fine, and it's not fine.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one I really enjoyed. I guess we should probably talk about just like the base aspects of it as well. What makes it different from other RPGs of the time, and how it makes it a kind of modern setting. So like, psi powers, obviously telekinetic powers stand in for magic in most games instead of swords and staves and stuff. Like Nintendo uses baseball bats, and you've got Anna using frying pans and such as your main weapons.
Yep. And I guess what's interesting is like, I don't know about you, but for me, there's a heavy focus on stat buffs and nerfs. Does that make sense? I use those a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Or like psi blocking, like blocking powers and all that. So I heavily use those in these games. I think the games are very much encourage that to sort of disable or crowd control, because honestly, the real problem when you get into a fight is when the enemy can summon other enemies, or you've got like just 3 enemies at once, and you're like, oh my god.
Yeah, if there was ever like 3 enemies at once, that was usually like I'm just gonna run, just because
it's a 4D slip time, baby.
Yeah, it's gonna take too long to deal with this, and the consequences too much. It's just easier to get the hell out sometimes. And because part of the problem with that is that you're limited on your multi-hit attacks. Like there's only like one character who can really hit multiple enemies at once.
Yeah.
So that's the big problem with that.
I'm trying to think of what else. Oh, I mean, I guess I should say, like, the art style and sensibilities are really hard to convey, but I think they succeed for this game, particularly in the music, obviously the writing, and then also the sprite work of the enemies.
Yeah, the music is such an important thing through all of these games to say, but I think that's one of the first early impressions that Mother 1 makes, especially that opening title music. It's this really serene song, and it does give you this sense of kind of like innocence beginning out, and it's really wonderful to come to every time starting up the game. I love that it kind of recurs throughout the series. I think it's easy to take for granted as well, just some of the very basic mechanics that are very advanced for it, and still are such a godsend. Like, again, even just compared to other NES games, you can save your progress here, and that's kind of absolutely vital and revelatory, for a system which primarily relied on like passwords, progression, right?
Yep.
And I like the way it's implemented too. It's not just like a menu function. Again, everything is integrated into the world, and that's one of the really nice things throughout the series. That there's never the game talking to you specifically, or when it does, it does so in a very unexpected way that just, kind of makes it all the more special. But I guess it's more in the later ones than this in particular. But yeah,
Yeah.
the fact that like the way you save is by calling your dad and he records your progress of your adventure. That's just like a really nice personal innovation there that makes it, makes you feel more integrated into the story and more immersed in what's in the world and what's going on.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say with the dad thing, it does two things simultaneously. They're like sort of at odds with each other, but it totally works thematically. Which is it showcases the distant father. Like it seems like he's always at work. It's that it just feels like it speaks a lot to Itoi because apparently Itoi had a rough parenthood or like a rough childhood with parents. But then also like you're right he's the safety. He's also the money source. So when your dad's like, "Oh, I sent some money. You've got $50,000." You're like, "Oh my god."
Dude, your dad's
Holy
loaded
shit.
in these games. Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy. He's hard at work, man.
It's a choice that in some ways you could say obfuscates the access of things because you then have to go to the ATM every time to draw in the money you've earned from battles, but it's a choice that immerses you more in what's going on in the environment there and makes you feel more like the character.
That's absolutely a goal. And I was reading to prep for this. I was reading Itoi interviews, and he cites like when he talks about direction. Number one, he cites like Animal Crossing as a primary influence on Mother 3, and he cites that he feels like when he was trying to make these games, he was trying to make them a little less like RPGs and a little more, or he tried to lean a little bit into sim influences where there's a little bit of this where you're supposed to breathe. You know what I mean? You're supposed to just enjoy being a kid in this town. You know what I mean? I don't get that feeling from Mother 1 because there's too many random encounters.
Yeah, that's the thing,
But
is that the random encounters entirely destroy any sense of exploration or immersion there. Of any of the locales, I'll say. I don't know. Do any of the locations stand out to you?
Stand out, yes. Immerse me, no. I like the the Eve location where you go down under the water and then you see the giant robot. And thankfully, that area, you always notice when an area does not have random encounters. Like there's like one labyrinth in the game. I'm pretty sure it's like the desert labyrinth with monkeys. I'm pretty sure that one doesn't have random encounters, and you just notice it. You're like, there's no enemies here. This is great.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is that there's also some infamous labyrinth sections of Mother 1. I think the factory in particular
is bad.
Yeah. And some of that
it's because you don't have any party members, and like it is complex for what it is.
Well, you're supposed to have a party member for the second one. There's two factories. The first one,
yes, true.
The first one,
true.
Here's another thing. I didn't go to the first factory.
Oh my god! So you didn't get Lloyd?
No, I did get him. I found a bottle rocket in the second one.
Oh.
I died, and so I was back at the town. And so then I was able to go to Lloyd and give him that bottle rocket.
That makes so, but that's so interesting how you're able, like, that makes a lot of sense for, like, there is an intended progression, but that's very loose. I kind of like that. It just means that you missed out on something that kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're lucky.
There's a couple of instances like that. Again, you can get like some of the melodies out of order and such, but yeah, so there's a little bit of non-linear progression you can make, but not like too much.
There's also towns you don't need to go to.
Yeah.
There's side quests you don't need to do. Sometimes they're easy though, so it's not like a really big issue. I don't know. I just enjoy seeing the people, like the scientists with the yogurt. I think it was yogurt, right? It's just little side quests that are fun. I don't know.
Yeah. There's a lot of enjoyable stuff, but again, I wish less of it felt, harder to achieve because of how, restricted and, some of it is. Again, I feel incentivized to just do what I'm supposed to do most of the time to deal with less encounters.
By the end of the game, were you feeling emotional?
No, I don't think so.
Damn, dog.
The story for this one is obviously a lot more basic than in the later two games. There's a bit there with Marie and the relationship to Geeg and raising him, but it felt very kind of like just formal and basic in terms of, you know, how you're supposed to care about or invest in this. There's a certain amount of emotional, I suppose, I felt in terms of like I like the concept of like utilizing the music as a means of, you know, combating and overcoming the threat, which is a theme I think that resonates in all three games. Again, it cannot emphasize enough how important music is to this series, obviously, but yeah, as far as like a personal stake in it, I felt less so than maybe I expected to, but more than
that's fair.
More than I would usually for I think a game of this era in particular. I think it felt a lot more personal than one would come to expect from something from the NES era because of the nice characteristic writing and there were moments throughout though. I'll say one moment that really stood out to me that was really nice was right before you get Teddy. Obviously the live show where you do the dance on stage. That is the first instance in the series I feel like of where they do something that's I think it's very important and they give you a reprieve. They force you to take a second and just kind of soak in a moment that you're in.
Yes.
And it happens a lot more throughout the subsequent two games, but that was a really nice moment in the first one. Again, to even see it in the first iteration like this, right before you kind of butt heads with Teddy, was important, I felt like, and very essential for the experience. And it left an impression.
Yeah, and it does so much for the kids because by the end of it, it's like the only reason why I care is because I spent so much time with them.
Mm-hmm.
But like in terms of character portrayal, they are very simple, and you need those moments, or the moment where Nintendo dances with Anna.
Yep.
Where they need some sort of characterization, and I think Earthbound does way better.
Obviously,
and I think Mother 3 even goes higher on that with some, you know, they're different things here, but either way, Mother 1 is a little too bare for what it is, but you still see the groundwork and foundations laid.
Obviously, and the idea is there. And I'll say, you know, again, like if I had this game in 1989 amongst my other NES Famicom games or whatever,
this shit would be crazy.
Yeah, this would probably be one of like, I would be talking about how innovative and incredible and revolutionary it is and how different it is. And I would probably play it a ton, despite all of the jank and the grindy aspects, because certainly at the time, like, this would have been so wholly different from anything else and would give you so much more personality. You're not getting the same level of character or emotion out of a Mario or Zelda at this time, you know? It's just not part of the formula.
Or even like my main exposure is like Final Fantasy 1 or whatever. Like, those are it's limited. And it's not to say that they don't have good stories, but like this is another step into expression of what games could be. So this was like a little bit of an evolution of everything. I don't know.
Another thing I'll say as well, right after the live show, one of the funny things that happened, again, when you get from talking to people, is that I got put in jail for taking a drink.
You're too young, man. You shouldn't have done it.
Oh, that was funny. It's good, like a great little optional comedic bit. There's like no consequence for it. Essentially, you just got to go get your weapon back. It costs you a little money, right, or whatever. Yeah, totally reasonable and a humorous bit to have happen there. So that's again one of the distinguishing character bits that really make me remember moments from the game. Just very unexpected quirks that you can or can't interact with, and they feel...
To me the game got better once I got 3 party members. I think before that I was like, yo, this is
I have written here that the party system is actually kind of rather badly done, because it takes a long time, first of all, to get the first party member. You can get
Lloyd's not that good.
You get the first 3 melodies out of 8 before you even get your first party member, really. And then you have to, like, even just to get them to be competent, you've got to grind them up, essentially, because they start out at level 1. Like we said, Lloyd is basically useless. Anna takes a good while to become useful, even, because she's got to learn all those psychic powers.
They all start at, like, fucking Lloyd and Anna start at level 1. So as soon as you get them, you have to grind.
Yeah. Teddy fortunately doesn't. He's not at level 1. Is the only kind of
Teddy. Look, Teddy's a perfect. I have no complaints about Teddy. No, Teddy. I love him.
Teddy's a boss. Teddy's a Chad. He carries you up that mountain single-handedly, and it's such a shame that you have to lose him.
No, I 100% agree. I like the ending. I don't know. There's something about singing to Geeg
Yeah.
that works for me in a different way than Gygus. We'll talk about that more when we get to Gygus. Do you have any final thoughts on Mother One?
Um, I feel like I summed up my conclusion about it pretty well here. I enjoyed it certainly for what it was, but also enjoyed playing it in a modern sense too, with all of my context and everything. I don't know that it's something I would come back to because of all.
I
of
would
the
play
barriers.
this game again. I thought about it. I would ask, would I play this game again? I totally would.
I feel
Not
like,
now.
Yeah.
Not anytime soon.
I feel like I would want to, but I feel like the battle system is just almost too discouraging for me. The random encounter specifically, not the battle system itself. The battle system.
I would tell you to do the Mother 1+2 or the 25th. Next time I play, I'm going to do that 25th
The
anniversary.
25th, yeah, the 25th anniversary seems promising because of not only those features, but also because of the graphical update. It sounds different and interesting. Again, I think the game looks great. I like its art style as it is, but the backgrounds are a little bare and repetitive. That's what makes some of those labyrinth sections,
especially
like
the
a
trees.
real slog. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And
like the swamp is bad because it's like rivers and then like just a bunch of trees everywhere.
Yep.
So you get lost, and the map is not that good. The map is pretty bad unless you want to basically know where the train route is.
Yeah, it's not the best environments overall. But the design of things otherwise is really pleasant. So that's the trade-off you get with the 25th anniversary version. But I think as far as for giving a different experience of it, that seems worthwhile to investigate. Yeah, if it weren't for just the absolutely grindy random encounters, I would probably like to revisit this game, but that is a big disincentivizing factor.
All right, I think with that, we're going into Mother 2.